Now, former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, who is now a senior CNN political commentator. Good morning, sir. So we've got a lot to talk to you about this morning. I think, listen, we'll get to Santos and all of that. You heard our conversation with the former Attorney General there. Do you think that the public at home, do you think they see the distinction between the Trump documents and the Biden documents, or is it all one thing to them? And what do you make of the discussion? He says, as a human being, it may put, the Attorney General may think differently about whether he would prosecute or not. But as the Attorney General, he's got to do his job.
Yeah, I think what he says is accurate. So first off, if you're, the good thing is law does nuance, right? The law does differences. The law can look at kind of differences in what was intention, and that matters. Politics doesn't do that very well. Politics, everything kind of blends together. And what we've learned in the last few years is if you can just throw enough doubt on the wall, that's enough to kind of win your case. So I think from a human perspective, yes, I think, for Attorney General Garland, he's going to continue to prosecute, even if the Joe Biden case, if necessary, correctly. Politically, this is very, especially the second batch. I mean, goodness, very damaging for the current president, and does a lot to throw a lot of cloudiness into the whole narrative here that's going on.
Yeah, the White House will still be facing questions on that today. But when it comes to what's happening on Capitol Hill and some of these Republicans who were initially not voting for Kevin McCarthy, then they voted for Kevin McCarthy, then we saw them get pivotal, critical seats on big committees yesterday. What is your reaction to people where it seems like they are getting seats on these committees in exchange for their votes for him as House Speaker?
So I'd like to pull the curtain back a little bit. And, Caitlin, I know you've been following Congress for a long time, and you remember some of these dynamics for the last 12 years since I've been in, which is every time we get to something that is going to be tough to pass but has to pass, or a speaker election, what ends up happening is this group called the Freedom Caucus, I call them the Freedom Club, they like to hold out, and they know, and actually they're quite effective at it, they know that leadership needs their votes, and they'll extract anything. And I knew after the first ballot that Kevin McCarthy would be Speaker because he would give up anything to become Speaker. They were very smart in terms of the politics of this to hold out and extract things that the Freedom Club never would have gotten otherwise. They never would have gotten what we called A committee assignments. Now, here's the problem. The so-called moderates, I'll just call them kind of the regular Republicans, the Tuesday group Republicans, they have as much or more power than the Freedom Club does. The difference is, because I was part of this group, we don't like to blow the place up. Like we generally are the ones that want to work as a team and get along. And so we are always outmatched, because when it comes to things like taking hostages, the one that's the most powerful is the one, pardon the pun, that's willing to shoot the hostage. And that's the Freedom Kids right now. And so they were able to extract a ton out of Kevin McCarthy. And unless and until the so-called moderates come forward and do things like vote against the rules, which they didn't do, the easiest vote, they're going to continue to get run over.
I'm not sure if you've heard of this guy named George Santos. We got a hold of his resume. And I mean, honestly, if you look at his resume, I mean, Caitlin and I were looking at
sure that's his name?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you're not being facetious. Do we know? Do we know if anything on his resume is true? You called for him to resign, right? And he came after you on Twitter, basically saying, if we have the tweet, I think he said, go on CNN or something and whine about it. There it is right there. Cry about it.
Yeah, go cry on CNN.
Yeah, what do you think of this?
Look, here's the other thing about throwing a bunch of confusion on the wall. I think I heard Kevin McCarthy say, well, a lot of politicians, or somebody said, they exaggerate their resume. Holy cow. Okay, let's be clear. This is not exaggerating a resume. It's a total fabrication. It's one thing if somebody, you see this a lot in military folks. They say, they had a certain job and they didn't. I think that's disqualifying anyway, but people have survived that. It is another thing to have obviously questionable where your money came from, but secondarily, say you were Jewish and then say, no, I was Jew-ish. Okay, come on. And then your mom died in 9/11, then she didn't. Everything about this guy is a lie. That is a fraudulent presentation. So if I'm running a campaign ad, Don, and I lie. I openly lie on it. If I say, the sky is green, they can come after me and have that pulled off the air for being false if I don't note it. This guy lied about everything to 700,000 people. I don't think he can continue, and I don't see how Kevin McCarthy. I get it; his majority is tight.
The people
Man, this
decide.
is about
Adam
honor.
Kinzinger doesn't get to decide. The Republicans in Washington don't get to decide. The Democrats don't get to decide. The New York State Republicans don't get to decide. The people get to decide. That's basically that's what he's saying, and that's what McCarthy's saying.
And the thing is, the people didn't decide because they thought he was somebody totally different. It was a lie and a fraudulent election. He has to resign. I think he does end up resigning because I think this pressure is going to be too great.
Well,
You
we'll
do?
see. We'll see if he does.
Okay.